All right, Gary.
Hello, Guy. Is there anyone on this planet? Sorry, one more second. Start again.
No, there's no one on this planet. It's just you and me. So I don't actually know why we bother still doing the podcast, really, as there's no one left to listen to it. Because as Jonathan King said, everyone's gone to the moon.
Yes. But I was going to say, is there anyone on this planet that doesn't like Bruce Springsteen?
Probably. And they'll probably leave a comment.
Everyone I know loves Bruce, no matter what you're into. You love Bruce, right? You love the boss. And but would you trust someone who was a musician, a songwriter, and an actor?
I think I came across one once. Can't say I like the cut of his jib very much. No, absolutely, and an activist, an incredibly effective activist.
Ah, yes, of course. Of course, I've probably made one of the most successful. What do we call that kind of music? We call it protest songs.
It's a protest. Yeah, it was, because it wasn't for charity. It was a protest song, and also just a great record.
A great record, incredible. Should we talk to this guy?
Let's get him on. Let's get Sil on. It's the one, the only, Mr. Steve Van Zandt.
Welcome to the Rockonteurs.
Okay, guys, I'm ready.
This was great, guys. It's so great to talk to two guys that have done this.
Well, it's a big tune for sure. I actually wrote that originally for Tina Turner.
Of course, I had gone and found Joni Mitchell down in Florida and brought her back.
You know, what people forget about Bowie is that he was such a kind man.
Remember me? I'm in a band now. It's called Roxy Music.
You know this thing about the 10,000 hours of experience?
Oh, yeah.
Get good at something. When we recorded Arnold Lane, we'd done about 50 hours.
The Rockonteurs podcast with Gary Kemp and Guy Pratt.
Hello.
Oh, whoa! Hello! Yay!
Steve Van Zandt.
There he is, Steve. Remember, what do we call you, Steve? Stevie. Man, it's such a thrill to have you here, because Gary and I like to think we tick a few boxes between us, and you tick all the boxes we love. Artist, sideman, actor, activist. Oh, it's everything we love, man.
Yeah. Wait a minute. I don't see Ronnie Cray, do I?
I was going to talk to you about that because I think you nicked a lot of your style from me, mate. Oh, God.
No, you were fantastic in that, man. Really great.
Well, listen, we both have something in common there as well. And Guy, I just did a TV show in the UK, and Guy was on that too. So all three of us have done the acting and music at the same time.
I've seen you many times, Steve. I've got to say, most memorably, it's always memorable, but I was at Hyde Park when you were with Bruce, when you did the positive, divinely inspired move of opening with London Calling, which was... Man, which you very gamely sang the second verse of.
Was that the same show where they pulled the plug on us?
That's right, on McCartney at the end.
What? They pulled the plug on McCartney?
Paul McCartney comes out with us, and we went 3 minutes past the curfew, and they pulled the plug.
What song were you doing?
Probably I saw her standing there, I think.
Because I saw the film of you doing that at the Roundhouse with Paul, when Paul comes on.
Yeah.
It's not easy to the same mic with a right-hander and a left-hander, is it? We're both playing guitars.
No, it's better. It's better.
Yeah, do you think?
Better. Oh, no, hang on. No, it's right. No, it's...
Nah, it's not. There's a lot of clash. It's different. Listen, hey, if you're singing into the same mic as Paul McCartney, you'd do anything. You'd do it on your knees, wouldn't you?
But you know what? Talking of that song, I was at a party a while ago, and I actually got talking to Paul. And for some reason, it came up about... mistakes that you make on records and stuff that get left. And for some, I blurted out, because it's always terrifying saying anything to Paul. Is there anything you've ever done on a record, Paul, that you thought was a mistake? He said, oh, well, there's a Beatles song called I Saw Her Standing There. It's like, yeah, okay, yes, heard of it. And he said, apparently, he reckons he fucked it up, but no one else noticed.
How?
On the recording? Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, I went back and listened to it.
It's still eating him away.
It's impossible to sing that and play the bass line at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just impossible, okay? So if he missed a note here or there, I mean, it's forgivable because, he's playing a different rhythm than he's singing.
And what was it like being on stage with him?
I am not exaggerating to say it was a thrill of my life. I mean, one of the great thrills of my life. I mean, coming on stage with the E Street Band was wonderful. He then invited me and Bruce on stage with him at Madison Square Garden, which was great. But coming on my stage, you know, endorsing my music and me, well, I mean, I was a 13-year-old kid. The first album I ever bought was Meet the Beatles in America, which we thought was their first album. It turned out to be the second album.
Right.
But, you know, that was my first album. And then that was my introduction to a whole new world and literally saved my life, you know. And now you're on stage with them. It was quite surreal. And, you know, you have to compartmentalize in those moments. You know, you can't think about being a fan. You have to just treat them as a fellow
Remember
musician.
your training. Remember.
Right. You know, you can't be trained for moments like that.
No, I know.
You know,
but it was wonderful.
You know, I get English guys loving the Beatles because to us, we're almost them. You know, it's the boy next door. It could be us. And in fact, if it wasn't for the Beatles, you know, I mean, what happened to me recently was I was reading the Mark Lewison book and ended up in tears at it when Paul meets John. I always end up in tears at that moment. It's the greatest story ever told. None of us would be here if that moment never happened. Well, how was it for American kids who'd listened to music for years and years that was their music that the Beatles were kind of copying? What is it about the Beatles that was so special?
No. I have to say, I think it was more special than it was for you, because it was so alien, you know, so foreign for us. First of all, my generation, I'm a 60s guy, so I missed the 50s, right? I missed the 50s and really early 60s. I started buying some singles. So the Beatles were introducing our own music to us completely. I never heard of Little Richard. I never heard of Chuck Berry.
Wow.
You know, why would I? You know, he was gone by the time we were growing up. So you know, they were, you know, in jail, or, you know, Little Richard saw Sputnik and decided, you know, to become a preacher. You know, I mean, you know, Jerry Lee Lewis married his 13-year-old cousin. You know, I mean, they were all the pioneers were gone, and, you know, and of course Buddy Holly, you know, died, and you know, so Eddie Cochran died. You know, so we were seeing an amazing moment, because I've never been interested in show business exactly, and we had single people, you know, we had whatever, the Elvis Presleys, I suppose, or whoever. We had singing groups like Doo-wop, and if you went to your high school dance, it was instrumental groups. So I'd never seen a band before. You know, most of us had never seen a band, period. You know, so here they are playing and singing, and eventually writing their own songs. We didn't know which one was their songs and which ones weren't. And it was a different communication completely to me. It wasn't me. It was, you know, here's us, here's the team, here's the friends, friendship, community, you know, the posse, the gang. Yeah. And that was what attracted me, you know. And I have to say though, by the time we met the Beatles, it was literally halfway through the career. I mean, they started in '57 actually, and were gone by '69. Yeah. So they were extremely sophisticated. I mean, you know, the harmony was perfect. The hair was perfect and completely new to us. The clothes were perfect and new to us. Everything was new. Their accent and their wit, you know. And so they showed you a new world, which was life-saving. But, you know, you didn't look at them and say, well, geez, I think I could maybe do that, you know. And luckily for us, 4 months later, the Rolling Stones came, you know. And I must say, they're the other half of the story, because they made it look easier than it was. They were very casual. They wore whatever they felt like. Yeah. Their hair was not perfect, except for Brian Jones. You know, they had no harmony at all. They were really the first punk band. So the way I like to put it is, the Beatles revealed a whole new world to us, and the Rolling Stones invited us in.
It's the one I was like, Pete Townsend had a great way of putting it. He said the thing that the Rolling Stones did was, he said they just kicked the door shut on show business. You know, they ended that.
I mean, what moved me the most, what really tipped me into really wanting to do this, was Mick Jagger was the only person I'd ever seen in show business who didn't smile. You know, and that doesn't sound like a big deal right now, but back then it was a very big deal, you know? And I thought, wow, you know, this is something different. It's not show business anymore. This is this is a lifestyle, you know. It's kind of they're on a mission, you know, and they really were on a mission in the beginning, the Stones.
Because the Beatles, they were the bridge, really. You know, they came out of that light entertainment. You know, they had the smiles. You know, Brian made them smile, got them the suits. You know, but they had these weird haircuts for a start, which they got from Germany. But then they become the great revolutionaries in music, doing things that no one else has ever dreamt of before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they led the way almost in every single step of the way, you know. And what they don't get enough credit for, you know, and I talk about a little bit in a book. I got a new book coming end of September.
Oh yeah.
We're not going to talk about it too much now, but basically the thing that they don't get enough credit for, in my opinion, is they invented the concept of evolution. Okay, and this is something that we all kind of take for granted now, but in the old days, pre-Beatles, you know, you'd have a hit, and if you had a hit, it was a miracle. And your job was to then have a second hit as close to that first hit as you could possibly make it, you know? And that was totally accepted in the way it was, you know? The Beatles, you know, all of a sudden, the second album was an evolution from the first. And then the next one was an evolution from that. And an evolution from that, you know? And that was a new idea. You know?
Yeah, because I always thought it extraordinary, the idea, if you heard Twist and Shout, there's no way you could picture that Across the Universe was down the road.
Five years later.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, 5-6 years later. I mean, you know, so I mean, that was something that really helped turn it into an art form. I mean, when the Beatles and Bob Dylan and the Stones and I would say the Byrds as well, they all got together and influenced each other. By 65, it had turned into an art form. But that was one of the reasons.
Although, according to your Rock and Roll Hall of Fame speech, it was the Little Rascals who were the first band.
Yeah, well, you know.
Well, yeah. But, you know...
I can see why you got the Sill gig off that, though.
Steve, let's stay on the Beatles for a second, because there's a similarity between Liverpool and New Jersey, right? You know, these are coastal towns. You think that those records that were coming out of America were getting on a boat just down the road from where you lived, and getting off the boat just down the road from where McCartney and Lennon lived. And there's a similarity in that sort of outward looking place that you both come from.
With the slight exception, I think we were before the riots. There's before the riots and after the riots in Asbury Park. By the end of the 60s, you know, a lot of cities were rioting because of various reasons. But we were kind of half Liverpool and half Brighton, really. You know, we were a little bit of a, you know what I mean? Like we before the town was leveled and became a wasteland, it was actually a resort town. You know, so it was a little bit different than Liverpool, which I picture more of an industrial, town. You know, we were a little bit more of a, you know, we had the boardwalk and the Ferris wheel and all those kinds of rides and things, which extended right into the 70s when we did our first residency as Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, which was my first band. I mean, there was nobody living there, but people would still come down on the weekends, you know. Because
there's such a specific kind of, and I would say specific to Asbury Park, but that Jersey sound, which is an R&B sound, but not, and it's so identifiable. But there's a weird thing that New Jersey has of being, it's like and this comes over a lot in the Sopranos of that thing of just being right next to New York, but then kind of so far away, being this sort of kid brother almost of kind of.
Well, yeah, it's the also ran, you know, it's the underdog.
Right. Croydon. It's Croydon.
That's why we joke about it. You know, we try harder, you know, because, you know, we're not New York, you know, we're not New York and we're not Philadelphia, you know, we were in between, you know. And so, you know, I mean, in a good way, the good part of it was, you know, when you're out of that intense pressure cooker of an inner city, you do have a little bit more of a chance to develop. You know, you can develop in that situation, which is what happened to us in Asbury Park. We really developed who we were going to be, and by the time we started Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, now keep in mind we had grown up with the British invasion, as we called it, which really was one in '64. I mean, for you know, a year and a half or so, they were absolutely British dominated the charts, and
we're never going to let you forget that. Never.
Put all the heroes out of work, ironically, you know, which was, you know, obviously a you know, unintentional consequence. But only a couple of people survived. I mean, the Beach Boys survived, the Four Seasons survived, and soul music survived. And what we grew up with was, now we had 7, 8, maybe 9 rock and roll TV shows on every week, which is, can you believe that?
We have one.
I know it was a good one. Ready, Steady, Go is a good one. But you'd have Rolling Stones would come on, and then Marvin Gaye, and then the Kinks, and then Curtis Mayfield, I mean, that was every single show was like that, and even Ready, Steady, Go, to some extent had the same
very
thing.
much, yeah.
And so we grew up with that rock and soul thing,
Right.
and basically that's what merged into Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes. We had the rock and roll guitars with horns, with the horns. So.
That's interesting because I hear a lot of the doo-wop in the Jersey sound. I can hear that would have been, and there's obviously a great irony here because doo-wop was formed on street corners by kids who couldn't afford any instruments. And then the Jersey sound ends up doing doo-wop with about 15 players all on stage at once, playing every single instrument ever invented.
Well, that kind of makes doo-wop the original hip-hop then, doesn't it? Because hip-hop was guys who couldn't get instruments either.
You could argue that. I mean, yeah. But we actually did a couple of doo-wop songs, along the way. But
weren't you in a doo-wop band for a bit, though, little Stephen?
No, that was really before my time.
Little Stephen. Sorry, a little. I'm so scared.
Excuse me, little Stephen.
We had to go back and discover that stuff. It was really before our time. I mean, I bought a few singles in the early 60s, but really, it literally was the Beatles, the first album I ever bought. So I had to go back and study the 50s, and that included doo-wop, which I love. I'm a big fan of doo-wop. I put it in my radio format. It's the only place you can hear doo-wop in the world is in my radio format. And
who would you point us to if we wanted the best doo-wop? Who would you point us to?
Oh my God. My favorite of all is a song called "I'm So Young" by the Students. A cat named Leroy King, which I think is probably one of the greatest vocals of all time.
The Students.
Students, yeah.
That's such a new wave band name.
You get the you get the Jive Five doing "What Time Is It?" and Our True Story, the Dubs.
Okay.
But Stephen, Frankie Valli, that was also coming before you as well, wasn't it? And must have influenced the kind of sound you guys were making.
Yeah. They were coming from like a doo-wop thing, as were the Beach Boys. And funnily enough, those are the two that survived the British invasion, and two of the very few. The Four Seasons. Sherry, I think it was 61 or 62. Then right away they had Big Girls Don't Cry, Walk Like a Man. They had 5 or 6 fantastic singles in a row, and so they actually survived the invasion, of '64.
Talking of which, there was actual Frankie Valli in The Sopranos, right?
Frankie Valli actually ended up in The Sopranos.
That was your actual Frankie Valli, because I just kept thinking, that's not actually Frankie Valli, is it? Surely that's amazing.
No, that was him. That's him.
Did you get him in?
That was him. No, do you know what? David Chase is a big music fan.
Oh no, I got that. I got
I'm sure Guy's going to talk about The Sopranos with you in a bit because he's a massive Sopranos fan. But I just want to ask you about, because there's an episode, isn't there, where Bruce Springsteen gets mentioned. So if Bruce Springsteen is in the Sopranos universe, where and who is it?
I actually tweet you about. Well, no, there's a more meta one than that, isn't there? There's when Tony is seeing his Gumar and a little Stephen track comes on.
What?
Yeah, and she says, "So what do you think?" And he goes, "Nah." So that's incredibly meta stuff, because I actually tweeted you this a while ago, Steve. I said it's seeing, because Bruce is referenced a lot in The Sopranos. So who's playing guitar for him in that universe?
Oh well,
Hills, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that was the thing. They Scorsese sort of introduced the idea of contemporary, in Mean Streets, like starting with "Be My Baby" by the Ronettes and "Jumpin' Jack Flash" by the Stones, which not songs you would have associated with the mob, with gangsters before that, So Scorsese, sort of merged the modern world with the whole traditional gangster thing. And I think,
by Casino, it had become parody, though, hadn't it? It's just wall-to-wall Stones.
Well, I didn't appreciate that movie when it first came out because it seemed redundant at the time. But you look at it now, and I think it's an absolutely fantastic movie.
No one dressed that cool in the 70s. Although you did. You had that whole. You were very fly, weren't you, with your suits?
For a minute, yes.
Just something just occurred to me, and it's relevant to what we were talking about earlier. And I was thinking, New Jersey and that sound is a little bit of what goes on over here with the Canvey Island sound, wasn't it?
Very much.
Dr. Feelgood. Dr. Feelgood, and there's a place not far from London.
I mean, we had the Jukes tour with Graham Parker.
The Rumor. There you go. That's very much
by his second album, he had some horns, I think, on it already. That was there was a group at the same time. You guys called it pub rock, it was bar band rock for us, almost exactly the same time. The Jukes, Mink DeVille.
Spanish Stroll.
Graham Parker, Elvis Costello, Dave Edmonds, all part of the same, even Huey Lewis.
Man, I want you on my pub quiz team. You've got your stuff down.
Well, no, I was there.
But I suppose because we had John Bon Jovi on the show a few weeks ago, and I love saying that, by the way. It sounds good. Now we got you on, and the similarity is that they all come out of cultures where a bar band plays every song that they know, whatever the audience shout out. They've got such an armory of songs under their belt, and that's kind of what John was saying. That's what it's like down on the Jersey Shore.
Yeah, and then Johnny took the more pop route, because he's smarter than the rest of us, and
because you guys were much more in tune. That army was seen much more in tune with the kind of sort of punk or new wave sensibility that was happening everywhere else, as opposed to the hair.
Yeah, we had a street thing that was just it was very natural for us, and it was sort of. And there's nothing wrong with it, but the Bruce Springsteen route was different than the Billy Joel route. Let's just put it that way. Nothing wrong with Billy. I love him. But there was a sort of a pop sensibility there. As opposed to a rock sensibility. And the '80s was just everybody peaked. Everybody was able to combine everything and sell ridiculous amounts of records. At that point.
No, because I was going to say. So I wanted to get to where you started because you were playing bass for a while, weren't you?
Well, in a group called Steel Mill, we had a different band every 3 months or so. A band would last about 3 months. Whoever was leading it, sometimes it would be my band, sometimes it would be Bruce's. Bruce had a group called Steel Mill, and the bass player, whatever, something happened. He said, "Do me a favor, just play bass for a minute." So I did, and people have been sending some of those songs on Twitter lately, and they're quite remarkable songs. That group Steel Mill. I mean, very weird, very strange. Bruce had just started writing, and was writing in a very bizarre and interesting way that I'm actually appreciating more now than ever. But anyway, they're just recordings from somebody in the audience, but crazy songs that.
Well, because Bruce's early writing was very, very wordy and Dylan-y and much, wasn't he? Before he
by the
honed
time,
it down.
Well, that was the first thing that the public was introduced to, But there was a lot before that, and before that it was more instrumentally oriented. So I mean. The average Steel Mill song was 8-9 minutes and went all over the place.
Prog!
In a way.
What was it like? Tower of Power or something?
No, not so much. No horns. Steel Mill was just 4-piece. But the big B3, it was like early Deep Purple, I'd say.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Where the organ was a big part of it, the big B3, and. A bit of Rhinoceros, which you may not be familiar with.
Oh, God.
That's the first and the last time they're ever going to be mentioned on this podcast.
And we actually did some gigs with the Allman Brothers, So we were kind of similar to them,
right?
We do,
of course, because they were long, yeah.
Before they made it, we were playing together several gigs.
I spoke earlier about that great moment in cultural history when Paul met John. We need to know the moment that you met Bruce, because that's an equivalent, right? And before you met him, what was he like from afar?
Well, what's interesting, and what's most interesting about the Beatles thing is there's pictures of it, for Christ's sake. I mean, talk about an entire life being photographed. I mean, there's pictures from the face, from the, I mean, isn't that unbelievable? There's pictures the day Paul met John. I mean, that's.
I still look at them, Stephen. I still look at them. I mean, for clues. I'm looking for clues.
It was not as eventful with us. I had a local band and he had a local band. We keep in mind there were no bands in America, right? February 8th, 1964. February 9th, the Beatles played a variety show. None. I'm not kidding. They're all instrumental groups, or doo-wop group, like I said, or the Elvis Presley's, Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet, And February 10th, everybody in America had a band. I'm not kidding. In the garage. Now, most of them,
stayed there.
Mercifully stayed there. but about a dozen of us got out of the garage and became the circuit in our area, And Bruce had one band and I had another. And he was a completely different person then. He was very, very quiet, never spoke. We had very long hair and kind of grungy. Grungy would be the best description, how you picture grunge, And I got very, we just became very good friends because we were the only two people that really were completely 100% into rock and roll as a religion. There was no plan B for us. We were just complete freaks, misfits, had no place in society whatsoever, And I mean, everybody, even the other 12 bands in the area, as soon as they had an option, they took it, to go to college, to join the military, join their fathers, go work for their father, or, we just, the only two guys left standing were me and him.
What was your home? I mean, were you fighting against stuff at home, or was
oh my God! No,
don't get him started.
my father was an ex-Marine, Goldwater Republican. I don't know, which means the beginning of the conservative movement was a guy named Barry Goldwater. And so we defined the generation gap that you may have heard about. We embarrassed our parents. They were, I feel sorry for them now, but they thought we were, drug addicts and just hopelessly, done. And and I eventually got kicked out of the house and kicked out of school because of my long hair, and we just didn't fit in. So we really strengthened each other, I think, in a very profound way. I think at that moment in time, which why we're still best friends to this day. We really, I think, needed each other. Just to have one person thinking the same way made you think you're not completely insane. Because it was a real long shot to make it, in rock and roll from New Jersey. I mean, it's even harder now, to be honest. But back then, it was a long shot that you really. I mean, your parents would say, "What are you going to do? Be a Beatle? You're going to be a Rolling Stone?" And if you were honest with yourself, you had to say, "No,
I'm going to be in the E Street Band."
You want to be that, don't you? That's what we all wanted to be.
That's it. I mean, and we were just miraculously we made it.
But when did you realize that you were going to be Bruce's sideman? Was there ever a moment when you wanted him to be your sideman?
I was actually quite popular, and my band was actually more popular than his. And we won all the battle of the bands. There was a lot of battles of the bands in those days, and we always won. And so but at a certain point, I just felt he started writing earlier than me, and he just had a vision that was quite, quite definite about where he was going. And I just felt, I can do some things that he can't. I was very good my ear was better than his. You know, I could hear things. You know, I was a good arranger very beginning. You know,
I want to get to that.
You know, and you know, so I could hear more musical things in different ways. I thought I could really compliment him, and so at a certain point, you know, I was a boss in my world. And when I joined him and started calling him the boss, then people started taking it seriously because I was like,
Did you come up with the boss? Is that yours? Did you coin that?
He started joking about it because Frank Sinatra was called the boss, you know.
Right.
So he started joking about it when he was absolutely meant nothing, you know. They started joking about calling himself the boss. I mean, but you know, nobody took it seriously. But when I started calling him the boss, people were like, wait a minute. You know, we thought you were the boss. You know,
that's great. He's the boss of bosses.
That was it.
It's an Italian thing, right?
Yeah,
that's right.
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? No, because isn't apparently we were talking about the what Bruce has said is your. I don't know if I'm jumping forward too far here. Bruce said is your greatest contribution to Born to Run is you saved the guitar riff. Right?
Yeah.
You didn't write the riff. You saved the riff.
You need that story.
Yeah,
again?
we won that.
Yeah,
Of course we did.
Yeah, come on.
Oh,
sorry,
God.
mate. I'm sorry, mate.
All right, quickly.
Don't you just have it recorded? Can't you just hit play? And
My greatest sound bites. Let's see. How can I do the short version of this? Basically, his first two records didn't do anything, and his career looked like it depended on what he's going to do next. So they worked literally for months on one song, and the song "Born to Run," and you know, and it sounds like it. It's quite amazing. One of the great songs of all time.
Telling me.
Great records of all time. Yeah, so anyway, they work on it literally for months, and Gary, you know what that means. I mean, working on a song for days is one thing. Weeks is already pushing it, you know? But months, it's like ridiculous, right? Yeah. So they finally get the mix, and in those days, I think this was a 16-track, if I'm not mistaken, the 16-track machine, which makes it even more complicated. Yeah. So they spent God knows how long mixing it. He invites me up, I go up and I listen to it, and I said, wow, that is just fantastic, man, you know. And I especially like that the minor riff is just so fucking cool, you know. And he says, what? I said, you know, the minor riff, you know, it's like a real Roy Orbison kind of move. You're kind of like it's something the Beatles would do, you know. And he's like, what minor riff?
Oh.
The minor riff in the chord. And he's like, he throws me the guitar. I said, what are you talking about? So what had happened was he's bending the note, playing like a Duane Eddy type of riff, right, with a lot of reverb, right? And he's bending the note, and where he's bending it from is the minor, and he's bending it to the major. But, you know, after working on it for months, what they think they're hearing, you know, is what I just said, bending the note to the major note. But actually, I only heard where he's bending it from. I never hear where he's bending it to because the reverb is making it go away, you know. So,
but it's unsettled.
So the riff is dun da 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 da, right, da da da, right, da 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 da. I'm hearing da 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 da.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Which I think is absolutely great.
But it's sad. It's sad. It's not uplifting.
Yeah, it's a little less triumphant.
Yeah. We didn't spend 6 months for sad.
Exactly. So finally he hears what I'm hearing, you know, and he's like, "Oh my fucking God," you know. And he goes in there and tells them, and oh, geez, forget about it. But
mate, thank you.
So,
thank you.
He's
from the world.
I saved his career, yes, you know.
But did you play the guitar in the end? Did you go in and do the riff?
No. I wasn't in the band. That's
what you went. But then you walked in, didn't you? And on the spot did the horn chart for 10th Avenue Freeze Out.
That was another session. He invited me up.
Oh, you didn't do it at the same session. Oh, I am disappointed.
No. He didn't invite me up now and then, you know. And after a while, they stopped inviting me, obviously.
Yeah.
No, he'll make us change shit.
I'm lying on the floor, Now, keep in mind, you know, this was a different studio now. This is the record plant, quite a famous studio.
Right.
And you know, here we are working our entire lives to get into the music business, you know, and we're so excited about it. And you know, pretty late in life. I mean, you know, well, I mean, you know, relatively, he signed when he's 22, 23. Anyway, so you know, I'm lying on the floor, and the 70s was the worst possible time to record. The engineers had taken over in a coup d'etat, and decided that they needed separation and clarity and, you know, and padding and everything that rock and roll hates. Okay, so you know, and what they would do is they would take all the life out of the recording, and then they would put it all back in the mix. You know? I mean,
yeah.
You know, so I'm lying on the floor, you know, and I'm listening to the recording 10th Avenue, and it just sounds terrible, you know. It just sounds terrible to begin with because everything's so padded, you know. And they're doing this ridiculous horn chart, you know. And Bruce made the mistake of saying, you know, what do you think? You know,
No.
You know, I'm not in the business, you know. I'm a street kid, you know. I don't give a fuck about anything. You know?
So you're just his mate at this point. You're not in the band.
No, just a friend, you know. We've been friends years before, you know, 10 years before.
And by the way, we all know, we've all been in the studio with the artist's mate coming in and telling us what we should be doing.
Yeah.
I mean, you do not want to be that guy.
Exactly. So, you know, he says, what do you think? I said, this fucking sucks, right? And silence, you know, dead silence. I mean, there's managers, there's engineers, there's producers, you know, there's like...
Oh, you had tons, didn't you? There's Landau, there's Appel, there's Iovine. I mean, I mean, Cooks.
I loved, he was advertising himself at the time. Get little Stephen in, he'll tell you how shit your track is.
So he says, all right, then go in there and fucking fix it, you know? So I said, all right, I will, you know? And I went in there and I sang them some parts and you know, they had a baritone, a tenor, and a trumpet, I think.
It was the Breckers, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I didn't know it was the most famous.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fucking Brecker brothers. Yeah, I'm just going to go in and tell the Brecker brothers what to do.
Wow.
And Dave Sanborn, right? The Brecker brothers and Dave Sanborn, you know, the most famous players. I sing them the parts and.
Yeah, hey, Miles, not like that.
Who'd written the part before? No, but who'd written the part before?
I don't know. I don't know. Somebody must have made some kind of chart, but we just redid it, and that's what you hear in the record. You know?
Where did you learn that stuff, Stephen? What was your in music? What was your background?
Just from listening to records. You know, I don't read or write to this day.
Yeah.
You know, but I started arranging horns and strings. The very first production. I Don't Want to Go Home for the Jukes.
Wow.
Arranged all the horns and the strings.
So how do you arrange strings? You just go because you know classically trained players. You can't. You know they don't. How do you do that?
You got to have charts. Yeah. But I get an orchestrator and I sing them the part. You know,
right.
In the beginning I would orchestrate as well. Through the years, you know, if I use the same guys over and over, I don't have to go through each single part. I can just sing the main melodies and, you know, and do a shortcut because they know how I want things orchestrated. If I hear something I don't like in terms of a voicing, I'll change it, you know. But in the beginning, I was doing the voicings and everything, you know, viola does this, a cello does that. And, you know, I was just making it up as I went, you know, I just, you know.
Big bull.
I mean, that's what records, I mean, that's what it is, isn't it? It's just like
that. Exactly. Because that's what the Beatles were doing, right? You know, it's what everyone was doing, was just, you know.
Well, they had George Martin had a little bit more education than I did.
So Stephen, when did you join? When did the E Street Band happen?
Well, right after that, Bruce decided that he had, like I said, his career was in big trouble. And they had 7 gigs booked for the new Born to Run album coming out. And so he said, I want to put the guitar down, you know, it's not really working right now. I'm going to try fronting the band for a minute, seeing if that makes a difference. So, will you play guitar for a minute? And so I was tired of the jukes, because I was managing the band as well as producing them and co-singing. We were like Sam and Dave. We had with two singers, and so I'm fighting with the club owners all the time. I needed a break, so I said, all right, let me come out for a couple of weeks. I'll play guitar. So I went out for 7 gigs basically, and then stayed 7 years.
But the footage of the show from that time. What's extraordinary, and I think what took everyone's breath away when we saw this in the UK is, the Beatles, like you were saying, there was a sense of family there, but this was absolute family, a gang on stage, and Bruce was the Fonz, right? He's the greatest leader of this gang. And I wonder if there is a bit of coming from Italian backgrounds that has anything to do with what we were seeing and feeling.
Well, maybe. I mean, we both. It's funny. Me and Bruce are both Italians with Dutch names, which is weird. In my case, I was adopted by my Dutch father, so I'm 100% Italian. I think Bruce is some other percentage, 50 or 60% Italian.
But there's a family thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's my orientation personally. Even when I started making my solo records, I made sure the band was like a family. That's just my own personal thing. Bruce, I think, has it to some extent also. And although he has more of a natural inclination split down in the middle of a band guy and a solo guy, he enjoys being the solo guy as well, which I never did really, especially, solo, like on stage with an acoustic guitar solo.
The ultimate expression of that, I would say, is when you went on to do Sun City, is just the sheer amount of people you got in to do that.
I listened to Sun City again today. What a song. It has not dated in the slightest. I mean, you listen to Feed the World or one of the, they're dated. Sun City could come out of the box today. I mean, it's a phenomenal track. What you did with Arthur Baker as well. It was
Townsend intro will get me every time. Was that actually him? Was that just you playing like him?
You gotta love him. It was a different mission in a way. You know what I mean? We weren't going for the biggest celebrities. We were going for people who had said something with their work or was, engaged socially somehow. And that was the way we chose those people. So it ended up more diverse, and we had, things like salsa represented with Ruben Blake and Ray Barretto, reggae was represented with Jimmy Cliff, some of the more, the lesser important sort of genres were in there, and we just, the mission was a bit different. It was a motivational song, it was a song about revolution,
But it covers an entire record. Just the people on that record are the basis of an entire and very complete record collection.
Plenty of people have written protest songs, including Dylan, who's on your protest song. But I think what's so clever about that protest song is it's really reaching out there and it's trying to get people's feet involved first. It gets people's heart involved before their brain. And I think that's the great skill of it.
But that's the difference. That's the difference between, I think, political music and social, social issues, feeding people in Africa is you're working from the heart, and this you're working from the fist. We really, we political music, you're pointing your finger, it's like, this is wrong. This is why. This is, how we fix it. This is the list of people we need to get. It's that kind of specifics that change the attitude of it.
Well, that's the basis of rock and roll, isn't it? It's you're coming back to, you're literally pointing out the man. You're standing up to the man. I mean, that's.
I mean, Ronald Reagan was God in those days, but people don't remember this. He was literally God, and to mention him in the song, it took a lot of courage for those artists to join in on that.
Well, a lot of American radio stations wouldn't play the song, would they?
Nobody would. We thank God, MTV was having a fight at the time because they weren't playing any black artists.
That's right.
So I went into MTV and I said, listen, I can solve your black artist problem with one video. Okay, I have more black artists in this video. Then you've played all year. And luckily they bought that. And you know, so if people heard the record, they heard it from MTV and a black network called BET. You did not hear the song on the radio. It was too black for white radio and too white for black radio. You know,
because I remember hearing, like, for instance, of all people, I remember hearing Daryl Hall being interviewed about it, and he said, well, you know, I don't want to call out any names. Actually, yes, I do. And then he just listed everyone who played Sun City. And it was like, yeah. Daryl got his game, you know, that was amazing.
Well, it was a big discussion as to, because, you know, we had a couple of rabble-rousers, you know, in the group. You know, there was 4 of us. Me, Danny Schechter, who was a natural-born troublemaker. Art Perry, who videoed everything, thank God, and Arthur Baker.
Arthur Baker, I know Arthur. We love Arthur. Yeah.
Because, you know, I mean, without Arthur's phone book, you know, it would have been 5 people. You know, so Danny thinking we're going to need publicity because it wasn't an issue in America. You know, it was a big issue in England and in Europe. You know, your unions were very strong.
Yeah, I played an anti-apartheid concert in Hyde Park in 1985. And there was 100,000 people there, you know, still.
Because of course, you know, you had Reagan, and of course we had Thatcher, who was having a big, massive love affair with Reagan, and we weren't applying sanctions to South Africa. So remember, so we were the bad guys too.
Oh no, it was the evil trinity of Reagan, Thatcher, and Kohl in Germany. Yeah. But I think, you know, Jerry Dammers, you know, Free Nelson Mandela had come out. I think. Yeah. But anyway, so it wasn't an issue in America, really. You know, and Danny says, let's mention who played there and get some controversy going. You know, for publicity. You know, and we even did a demo mentioning some names. And in the end, I said, no, I really want. It's going to end up being a distraction. I want to try and keep the music people as a family together here. Let's keep our eye on the ball. You know, which is, you know, establishing the cultural boycott so we can get to the economic boycott, which is the home run, you know, in the end. And that's what we did. So I met with Queen and I met with a few people who had been there. And they by going there, by the way, they had gotten themselves onto the United Nations blacklist, which was quite serious because the unions in Europe were taking that list seriously. So a lot of people who had played there were going to have trouble working, you know, and there was a few. So I met with them and they said, you know, how do we get off this list? And I said, listen, just say you're not going to go back. It's as simple as that. You're not going back to Sun City. I'm going to take the position that you were manipulated, you were fooled, you thought you were playing a different country, which is how they advertised it. You know? And they really overpaid everybody, you know. And I said, you know, so I said, we're going to assume that you were manipulated, you were fooled into doing it, and you're not going to go back. That's all you have to do, and I'll get you off the list because the UN was sending everybody to me.
This is still coming into play here. I'll get you off the list.
So I got everybody off the list, and even Paul Simon, who ended up, you know, being the one.
Well, he was in trouble for the wrong way round, wasn't he? Because he'd been working with Ladysmith Black Mambazo, who are black South African musicians.
He intentionally violated the boycott. He was opposed to the boycott. So, you know, me and him ended up, you know, a bit of a problem. But he was the only exception. Everybody else, you know, said we're not going back. You know, and we shut down Sun City overnight. You know, we were very, very, very successful.
Incredible.
How good did that feel?
Well, one of the most amazing moments of my life was watching Mandela come out of jail. I mean, that was, you know,
I'm feeling you had some hand in that.
Because you didn't really quite believe that would ever happen. You know, and they really, you know, once we overrode Reagan's veto of the economic sanctions, then it felt like dominoes, and they had to let him out. And out he came, and oh my God, it was like a miracle, you know.
Yeah, amazing. Listen, Stephen, you know, a lot of what you and Bruce have always sung about, and a lot of what the Jersey Sound is about, it's about singing about the underdog. It's about singing about the urban man who and his struggle and the sense that he's disenfranchised. And obviously, your allegiance was certainly Bruce has been, you know, publicly been Democrat. Suddenly, you've not got the old-fashioned left and right in your country, and it's more about identity politics, and it's more about Trump comes along, and he's suddenly the guy who's for the urban man. How does that feel? Was there a sense at some point that you'd felt not deserted, but you were no longer the voice for that guy, and that was frustrating?
Oh my God, it's a big subject. But basically, we've been living in an insane asylum, for 4 years, and I feel the same way about Brexit, by the way.
Thank you.
Equally big mistake as Trump.
Yeah.
But
it's the same people. It's the same people behind it.
So, I mean, the Tories are the Republicans, as far as I'm concerned. But this became the biggest scam, the biggest hustle, the biggest con in history, and he's just the greatest con man that ever lived. And he conned the working class into thinking he was for them, and the Republicans, who've never done a single thing for the working class to this day. I mean, even the relief bill, which has been in the House of Representatives for 10 months while Trump was still there, McConnell and the Republicans just refused to help anybody. They couldn't care less. So I don't know. I've reduced this whole thing in my mind, to this, which is, 74 million people voted for Trump. Okay, after he murdered 500,000 people, and I consider him the biggest mass murderer in history, in America anyway. Why are people voting for this guy?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but I've reduced it to the fact that they are completely scared of or hate Black people. Okay, they are scared to death of immigrants and blame immigrants, and they blame Black people for all of their problems. And I know that sounds ridiculous in this 21st century, but I'm telling you right now, it's a fact. It's fear of the Black man that is completely irrational. It's the only possible explanation for voting for this guy.
Well, you have said, you very brilliantly said on record that the problem is because there is no integration that could be sorted out in one generation, right?
We've never integrated our country. I talk about some of this in the book, although I didn't want to spend too much time with politics in the book. But it was, we have to now accept the fact that in our case, we were founded as a white supremacist country. Okay, that was our, with an asterisk, and the asterisk is, well, a couple of the guys feel guilty about it. So they put the ideals are present in our founding fathers, all men are created equal type stuff. It's all in there, but the fact was slavery was in the Constitution. Women had no equality in the Constitution. Now we're slowly fixing these things. We haven't fixed our integration yet.
If the greatest integration that ever happened in America was music, surely. That's the cultural integration.
All youth movement, all great cultural movements come from white kids and Black kids checking each other out.
E Street Band was one of the first mixed race bands, really. There were two Black guys in there.
We were one of the biggest. One of the first was actually the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. It was a fantastic band, and
Sly, funny enough.
Sly, Sly and
Andy Newmark playing drums.
Love.
So there wasn't too many, but we got Clarence with the saxophone was a nod to tradition as well. So we were kind of carrying on the tradition of rock as well as the integration of rock. But
I think that's why that Born to Run cover is such a powerful image, isn't it? That was such a great,
It took the Alan Freeds of the world to play Black music for the white kids, because our radio was segregated entirely. Black radio played this, white radio played that.
That's because that's the thing we never had. We always complained that our radio was shit. We just had Radio 1, but you heard everything. You heard everything on that one station.
Yeah, by the late 50s, we were hearing everything. We had fantastic radio.
But then you had FM, everything. You had your Rockstar. That's why you end up with Disco Sucks, which is the most out and out racist campaign there's ever been, right? Isn't it?
Can I just go back onto this your fantastic arranging and your E Street Band family. There's a great clip on YouTube of a few years ago. You look like you're in a football stadium somewhere, and it's the bit where Bruce is taking requests from the audience.
Oh yeah.
And you end up doing "You Never Can Tell," the Chuck Berry song, but you've never done it before. And you pull it together, you decide what the key is going to be, and the whole band ends up rocking this tune. And there's the bit, my favorite bit at the end is you're going between wherever your key you're in, maybe you're in G, so you're going between D and G. And then as it ends, Bruce holds up 4 fingers and you all go to the 4th chord. I mean, what a band. I mean, how is that? Are you shitting bricks when he does all that stuff?
No, you got used to it, We grew up with that stuff. I mean, it's the James Brown thing, really.
Yeah.
James Brown was the guy who was giving these signals, and people were reacting very, very spontaneously. So we kind of comes from that. But we've been doing it a long time, and we just started taking requests, which was a new idea.
From 80,000 people. How do you do that? Sorry, I didn't. What?
We rehearse it right on stage, So it's a way of turning a stadium into a club. You know what I mean? It really is.
And Stephen, you guys, I mean, the songs you can pull out of the bag overnight. I mean, there's that in the wonderful footage I've seen of you going to the Cavern Club to do that lunchtime gig.
Yeah, your whole Macca to Macca thing, fantastic.
Yeah. You're all in the back, and the whole band are learning 20 Beatles songs, in seconds. And then there are more of you in the venue than audience because there's so many musicians.
We grew up with that ability to learn things quickly, and I mean that particular once Paul came on stage, which was just a miracle, put me in a Beatle-y mood even more than usual, and we're heading to Liverpool, and I remembered that when the Beatles started, they did this crazy thing that can only happen in England called lunchtime sets.
That's how they started at the Cavern.
Yeah. And the clerks in the shop, the secretaries would bring their lunch to the Cavern, and the Beatles would play for half an hour. Now, this is such a wonderful eccentricity, I mean, it's just crazy, right?
Well, it's to take their minds off how awful their lunch is, because lunch in Liverpool in 1960 was not good.
So I said, call the Cavern. Tell them we're playing Liverpool Saturday night, and I want to do a lunchtime set, And they call up and say, "Well, we haven't done that in 40 or 50 years, but why not?" So on the way we had like 4 days, and I said, "Okay, let's do half the set Beatles songs with horns, because nobody ever hears the Beatles songs with the horns, and the other half." We'll do cover songs that the Beatles actually played at the Cavern,
Oh, nice.
They assumed I wanted to play the bigger room because they have a bigger room now. Because that's where Paul played. And I said, no. I have to have the room, for the only film that we've ever seen is the Beatles doing Some Other Guy with the Arches. I have to be in the room with the Arches. So we barely fit the rhythm section on the stage. You can see in the DVD.
I know, I've seen it. It's mad.
There's a wall, and the horns and the girls are on the other side. We couldn't see them, So we kind of end the songs around the same place, but we couldn't see each other.
How amazing! Listen, I know you're going to have to go soon, but I know Guy doesn't want to let you go without.
Well, there's not really anything I want to say. It's just that I'm such a huge Sopranos fan.
Plenty of time for you, so.
Oh wow. Okay. Going. Oh man. No, because there's just so much. Because I wondered, you're clearly such a good person. So when you were offered that role, and is that David Chase literally just saw you give that little rascal speech and said, "This guy's got to be in my show"?
Yeah.
I mean, admittedly, I've watched that speech, and it is the most New Jersey thing I've ever seen. I mean, it is like you are auditioning for the part of this guy. It really is. We're going, some guys were making some noise in England. I mean, it's amazing. But apparently, you said your thing was that you didn't want to take an actor's job. Because you said these guys learn and everything, And so David Chase gave you some bullshit about how he's invented a character, although the idea that there wouldn't be a consigliere is frankly a bit of a stretch.
No. I watched him invent it because it wasn't in the pilot. I read the pilot script, and there was no Silvio.
Because what's interesting, because
you're turning into a total fanboy now, Guy.
No. I was going to say, I wondered how hard, because Sil manages to stay out of trouble for a lot of the stuff you do is kind of okay. That you only get into a couple of fights and stuff. It's not until the Adriana thing that's really, really dark. And I just wondered if you had trouble with that, because James Gandolfini had real trouble playing such a dark person because he was clearly such a kind man. Had that kindness that shows in his eyes, didn't he? Which is what made you root for him.
Well, I mean,
or you just think it's acting? I don't care. I'll kill them all.
Yeah, I mean, I had to. You got to kind of create. I'd written a biography about the guy, and I made sure I looked like the guy in my head. I found out where John Gotti got his clothes made. I mean, I had to, because like I said, I lived through. My wife was the real actor in the family. I she'd gone to acting school and done off Broadway, and so I'd watched her what she went through as an actor. And that's why I said to David, I said, geez, she's watching what Maureen goes through. I really feel guilty taking a job, of somebody who's gone through all that, And he literally said, no, I'm going to write you in a part. I want you in the show, So he asked me, he says, what would you like to play? What kind of role? And I said, well, I never thought about acting before, but I had thought about writing, and I had written a treatment about an independent hitman named Silvio Dante, who opens a club called the Copacabana, Copacabana style club, but in present day. And and it has all of those old, the big band and the Jewish Catskills comics and the dancing girls. But it's set in present day, so he kind of lives in the past, and he kind of looks like the past, and the five families have their own tables, and the police commissioner and the mayor have their own tables, and a lot of the drama all takes place in the club, kind of like a mafia version of a Casablanca, and so David really liked the idea, and he went away and came back a day later and said, well, HBO says we can't really afford that idea, but we'll make it a strip club instead, and you'll run the club for the you'll front the kind of run the club for the family, and we'll use the back room as their clubhouse, as their office, and then by the second season, it really turned into the consigliere and the underboss,
Right.
But at first, I was just like one of the guys, Tony's friend, friend of Tony Soprano, and. Yeah, so it kind of grew, as it went.
One thing that's so brilliantly observed is the fact that they're so self-referential. Like your big quote, that you always have to come up with. I'm not going to ask you to do it, even though I'd love you to. Just when I thought I was out, but that's from The Godfather, right? That's not even your quote. I mean, that's the lovely thing. And the Bada Bing is called the Bada Bing from The Godfather. It's so fantastically meta in that way.
Well, we're intentionally impersonating the Godfather in that moment. The role of the Godfather actually did play a major role in the real mafia. Even though a lot of the Godfather movies are not exactly how the mafia works, but to some extent, a lot of the younger mob guys were learning from the Godfather how to be a gangster.
Yeah.
It was a very, very art imitating life, imitating art situation going on in real life. I mean,
yeah.
So we reflected some of that in The Sopranos.
But how much? And so how? I'm just intrigued. How pervasive is the mob in Jersey? I mean, how much of a part is? Because there's a lot of it's quite shitty nickel and dime DVD players, isn't it? It's,
the genius of the show, I think, among other things, was taking what has become an extremely boring job now. Half of them are sitting around reading the racing form all day, I'm sure from what I hear, and making a very boring lifestyle actually compelling somehow,
Yeah.
And the genius of David Chase was making that compelling. And I think he did it by the universal challenge of people who have to balance their work life and their family life, Now, granted, this work happens to be, the mob, which is a bit exaggerated for most people, but the universal truth of that balance, I think, is what ended up becoming so popular.
Yeah, because frankly, it's got that great thing. It's like there's a screenwriter who said, like, the sign of a great horror movie is if you take the horror out, it's still a great movie, right? And The Sopranos has that in that if you took the mob stuff out, it's still a great show. It's still just these midlife crisis guys, families in suburban New Jersey.
There are only 7 stories. There are only 7 stories. That's what they say. So,
Yeah.
And Bruce and Stephen have written most of them in their songs. Stephen, where are you now? How's your lockdown been? That's what I want to know.
I luckily had the most productive last 3 years of my life, 17, 18, and 19. Honestly, I got 6 album packages done, through 2 tours, 2 new albums. Released the Lilyhammer score I had done, remastered all my masters again. Literally 6 packages, and a 7th one's coming out in June, the Summer of Sorcery live DVD. So I had the most productive 3 years. Toured around the world twice, and I kind of was okay with staying home for a minute. Actually.
And you did Bruce's album as well.
The pandemic was actually just what you needed, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, because I cut the tour short, luckily, thinking that we were going to tour with the E Street Band summer of 2020. So I said, let's leave a few months. So I stopped the tour like November 6th, and we were in the studio like November 15th or something. And Bruce booked 5 days. And I thought, well, that's a little strange, but okay, maybe he just wants to try some things out, and then, then we'll really get into it and, spend a couple of months. We did the whole album in 4 days. We had nothing to do on the 5th day. We sat around drinking tequila, listening to the record. I mean,
it's a beautiful film, that, and it came out, at a time when none of us could see our friends, and it really made me cry when, beautiful black and white photography, when you guys all walk into that studio, that wonderful barn studio he has, and you're all meeting each other, and the sense of camaraderie and friendship and coming together again, that really spoke to me at that moment.
Yeah, luckily, just before the quarantine, obviously, just a month or two before the quarantine hit, and so that was good timing. Just happened to be good timing. So so I got 6 album packages plus the E Street Band record. So I've been happy to be home, to be honest. I'm not a big socializer anyway, and my dog appreciates it. I'm not sure my wife does, but my wife's ready for this virus to be over, I think.
So what are the plans?
But I travel so much. I mean, I travel all the time. So
where is home, Steve?
Manhattan. I'm in Greenwich Village.
And you've been writing?
I spent the whole pandemic basically writing the book. Yeah.
Oh, right. Great.
So tell us about the book. So that's coming out in September. That's all done, right?
It's now September. And it was tough. It was a challenge because there's a lot of stuff, and for me, it's not a matter of what you put in; it's a matter of what you leave out. Because
Gary and I have both written books. We do.
So you feel like
I just knew what I was going to leave out. I was going to leave him out. That's all I'd planned on doing right from the start. That was my sort of main thing.
Yeah, so it was quite a challenge. I felt like I don't really care that much about my life. It's just I think along the way I've found some things that can be useful to others, and I'm hoping that's what people take away from the book. Is I've learned a few things along the way, basically, and I'm one of the great advisors of the world not because I'm smart, it's because I'm so stupid, and I've fucked up every possible way somebody can fuck up. So when I suggest something, people should listen because I know,
like Bruce did.
Well, sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't.
Listen, it's been such a pleasure having you on here. Oh,
because I said you got so much to teach, because you've given so much to us, Steve, in so many ways. I mean, as an activist, as a musician, as an actor. I mean, it's it's brilliant. We thank you.
Well,
salute you.
Great to meet you all, and hopefully see you in person eventually.
Well, indeed.
Yeah. Good luck. What's the book called? Do you know yet?
Unrequited Infatuations.
Beautiful. Oh, what an amazing guy he was.
That could have just gone on. What was so sweet is he clearly would be happy to talk for longer, but you can't take the piss.
Well, no, you can't. And there are people listening whose ears must be burning, because we're all 3 of us at one point were just gabbing so excitedly.
It's brilliant. He's just got so much information.
That's the reason why I love doing this show as well. Because to be in the same feeling that I'm in the same room as little Stephen and having that connection with the E Street Band and with Bruce and some of the greatest stuff in in music history. It's such a thrill.
And the hope that just maybe something will rub off through osmosis, just a little something.
Yes, a little bit.
Stardust.
Down the Zoom line. So listen, thank you for listening. We are the Rockonteurs, Guy and I, and we want to thank Ben, our producer.
Yep.
And thank you, of course, for being so nice and tuning in, and so many of you now listening. And hopefully we'll keep these coming, won't we, Guy? You've got a few
coming. Absolutely. If it's the last thing we do.
You've got a few rock stars in your wardrobe, haven't you?
I've got, I think there's a couple of phone numbers left. I haven't worn them all out. Same with you.
Good. So we'll keep phoning and you keep listening. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. It's good night from me.
And good night from her.